My name is Nancy. At the time, I was 33 years old, living in Denver, Colorado, and running a small company specializing in investing in and renovating old houses. I started from scratch, with no parents backing me, no one pulling strings for me. What I have today is the result of 10 years of working through holidays, weekends, and sometimes even without sleep. I'm not the showy type, but I'm proud that I was able to buy a penthouse overlooking the Rockies without signing a joint loan with anyone. I met Julian at a real estate seminar in San Diego. He walked into the auditorium with a kind of arrogant confidence that made people either curious or annoyed. I fell into the curious group. Julian wasn't just good-looking and charming, he was incredibly persuasive. He knew how to make a woman feel like she was the center of the universe, and even though I recognized the tactic, I still felt a bit unsteady. Julian introduced himself as someone investing in sustainable urban development projects, regularly traveling between New York, Houston, and Los Angeles. He never said outright that he was wealthy, but the way he drove a Porsche 911, wore a Patek Philippe watch, and casually mentioned a ski trip in Aspen made it impossible not to draw conclusions. I dated Julian for about a year before we got engaged. At the time, I thought I was lucky to have found a partner with similar goals, vision, and willingness to share. But what surprised me was how secretive he was about his family. Every time I asked, he'd just give a faint smile and say, "You'll see, they're a different world." And they truly were a different world. The first time I met Julian's parents was at a cocktail party at their mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut. The house exuded old-world pride, with ancestral portraits framed in gold lining the hallways, like silent overseers tracking every guest's movement. His mother, Patricia, was the type of woman whose eyes scanned you from head to toe before she allowed a smile. She wore an olive green Chanel dress, pearls, and even held her wine glass like it was part of some ancient ritual. She shook my hand and said, "Oh, you must be Nancy. How interesting that Julian chose such an independent girl." It sounded like a compliment, but I clearly sensed the thin layer of disdain beneath it. His father, Charles, was a tall, quiet man whose gaze seemed to assess your worth by the second. He didn't ask me anything about feelings, love, or my future with Julian. Instead, he asked about the average return rate on each property I invested in and seemed genuinely pleased when I answered smoothly. "At least you've got a business mind," he muttered. I kept smiling, but something about it all felt off. They didn't ask whether I loved Julian or if I was happy. To them, life seemed like a series of calculations, and I, apparently, was part of some larger financial equation. Julian stayed by my side, his hand gently on my back whenever the atmosphere felt stifling. He smiled, joked, tried to keep things light. I told myself it was just the first meeting. Things would change once they got to know me better. But I was wrong. Seemingly harmless remarks like, "It's good Julian found a woman who knows how to manage money," or "It's not easy entering a family with this kind of tradition," became more frequent. I'm not easily shaken, but I couldn't deny that I started to feel like I was being seen as a tool, a pawn they could maneuver to serve some deeper agenda. I didn't realize then that this was just the beginning, and that family, with all its noble, orderly, and wealthy facade, was hiding schemes I could never have imagined. 2 years after the wedding, one early fall afternoon, Julian suddenly told me that his parents wanted us to come to the Newport, Rhode Island estate to discuss the family's future. Even though I was used to their formalities, there was something odd in Julian's tone that day. He wouldn't meet my eyes for long, just brushed the topic aside as if it were a casual event, then quickly changed the subject. We made the trip to Newport the following weekend. The mansion stood by the sea, built of gray stone, looking more somber than grand. Inside were the usual expensive furnishings, ancestral portraits looking down from the walls as if whispering things I didn't want to hear. Patricia, my mother-in-law, welcomed us with her usual cold smile. She instructed the staff to serve dinner in the glass garden room, where you could watch the sunset dip below the ocean. But the beauty did nothing to calm my growing unease. We ate the appetizer in silence, broken only by the soft clinking of silverware on porcelain and the distant sound of waves. Charles, my father-in-law finally spoke when the main course was served. He set down his knife and fork, pushed his chair back slightly, and pulled out a thick stack of papers from the briefcase beside him. Nancy, he said, in a steady tone like he was giving a presentation, our family is entering a new phase. To ensure financial stability and unity, we've prepared a small document. I looked at Julian, hoping to see a shared glance or at least a hint of surprise, but no. He smiled, tilted his head toward me slightly, and said softly, "It's just a formality, sweetheart. We're a family after all." I looked back at the document. On the cover, the Holloway Family Asset Trust Agreement. I opened to the first page. Just a glance at the opening lines was enough to understand the nature of this formality. I would be transferring all of my assets, my personal investment portfolio, 3 rental homes, retirement fund, and savings accounts into a trust managed by senior family members. And, of course, as the person creating the trust, me, I would have no authority to withdraw funds, sell assets, or intervene in any activities of the trust without written approval from the family board. "Are you kidding me?" I asked, my voice dropping low. Julian kept his gentle smile. "I know it sounds serious, but really, it's just a way to unify our finances. My parents are doing this to protect the family assets. You trust me, right?" "Trust?" I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. I turned to Patricia. She was watching me like a predator, waiting for its prey to step into the trap. "And what if I don't sign?" I asked, placing the contract back on the table. Patricia tilted her head, sipped her wine, then replied, "Oh, nothing really. It's just, it would be such a shame if someone didn't understand the meaning of family commitment." I smiled faintly. Family commitment or asset control? The air at the table turned heavy. Julian frowned. Charles sighed, his hand still resting on the documents. "Nancy," he said, "you're a smart woman. This is a chance for us to build a strong financial legacy. Julian's family is about tradition. Trust is the foundation." Then, I picked up the contract and flipped through a few pages. Why are there no clauses in here to protect me? No lines allowing me to withdraw funds if needed. No voting rights. No authority to sell assets. Just an obligation to transfer everything and sit back while your family runs the show? Julian quickly chimed in, his voice noticeably lower. "You're overreacting. It's really nothing. They just want to protect you. Trust me." I looked him straight in the eyes. "If it's for me, then why am I the one losing all control?" Julian went silent, 1 second, 2 seconds. Then he shrugged like he was tired of explaining. "Nancy, you're overcomplicating it. It's just paperwork." I placed the contract back on the table, lifted my chin, and smiled. "Well then, you won't mind if I let my lawyer take a look at it, right?" Patricia froze. Charles furrowed his brow. Julian, for the first time, lost his composure. Just then, the back door of the garden room opened. A woman with brown hair, dressed in a gray suit, walked in with a confident stride. She placed her document bag on the table and nodded to everyone. "Sorry for interrupting dinner," she said. "I'm Claire Preston, legal representative for Ms. Nancy." Petra glared. "This is a family matter. There's no need to involve outsiders." Claire didn't react. She simply opened her folder, pulled out a contract identical to the one I had just been given, and began to speak with a sharp, professional tone. "After reviewing the full content of this agreement, I can confirm that this is a blatant financial manipulation document. Not only does it demand the transfer of my client's entire personal assets, but it also completely strips her of any legal control over her own property." I saw Patricia's hand tighten into a fist. Charles frowned but remained silent. Claire continued, "This contract offers no protection for Nancy's interests. On the contrary, it places her in a completely passive position, unable to withdraw funds, object to decisions, or access financial information without written consent from her in-laws. This isn't asset consolidation. This is appropriation." "That's enough," Charles spoke, his voice deep and heavy. No one here is trying to harm Nancy. You're overinterpreting, Claire responded calmly. Then why is the contract structured so that she loses all control over her assets, while the other side gains full authority? If this is a family matter, then why was it kept from her until the very last minute? Julian tried to jump in. Claire, I think we can talk privately. This isn't? No, I cut him off. We're going to talk, right here, in front of everyone. No more just a formality or trust me. I've trusted you for 2 years, and this, I tapped the contract, is what I get in return. Patricia regained her usual soft tone, though it sounded strained this time. Nancy, dear, we just want to protect you. Money can be dangerous, and there are risks you can't always foresee. I laughed, but there was no joy in it. Funny, I've faced risks my entire life to build everything from scratch. And now my in-laws, who haven't contributed a dime, are asking me to hand over everything in the name of protection? Julian stood in silence. No more justifications, no more gentle smiles. I looked at Claire. I'm not signing anything, and if they keep pushing, I'm prepared to take this to court as a case of asset interference and abuse of marital power. Claire nodded. I'll start preparing a case to protect your rights, and from this point forward, I suggest that all financial contact from your husband's family be made in writing and in the presence of legal counsel. I stood, gathering my bag. Thanks for dinner. I think I've had enough family warmth to last me the whole year. Patricia said nothing. Charles remained silent. Julian sat motionless like a statue. I turned and walked out of the glass garden room, hearing Claire's steady footsteps behind me. On the way to the car, Claire spoke softly. You handled that very well, but I don't think this is over. I looked straight at the wrought iron gate opening before us, a faint smile on my lips. I don't think so either. They picked the wrong person to mess with. I left the Holloway estate that night feeling not just betrayed, but as if I had just escaped a trap 2 years in the making. On the drive back, Claire stayed silent, occasionally glancing at me through the rearview mirror, as if checking to see if I was still composed. I didn't say a word. Inside me, one part still trembled with fury, but another had switched on, the part that had helped me build an entire business from nothing. Cold, precise analysis. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in front of my laptop, pulling up every financial statement, every bank transaction I had once overlooked, thinking, married couples shouldn't keep score. But now, everything was suspicious. I found a few odd transactions from a secondary account. One Julian had asked me to open with him, for our joint investment plan. I hadn't paid attention at the time. I trusted my husband, trusted that he was educated, calculated, and would never betray the one person who stood by him when the world still barely knew his name. The next morning, I called Claire. I need a private investigator, I said bluntly. Someone really good. Claire didn't ask why. She simply replied, I know someone. I'll reach out today. That afternoon, I met Adam, a man in his 40s, quiet, sharp, with the kind of look that had seen too many dark corners of the world. I gave him everything I had on Julian: bank accounts, emails, phone numbers, even small details like travel patterns, frequent locations, and names he often mentioned socially. I want to know everything, I said. Debts, assets, outside relationships, and if there are any loans taken out under my name, I want proof. Adam nodded, no extra words. I'll get started. Don't expect results immediately, but when I find something, I'll let you know. 3 days later, Adam called. His tone hadn't changed, but there was something in his voice that made my blood run cold. You might want to be sitting down when you read the report I just sent, he said. I opened the PDF file the moment we hung up, and as I skimmed through the first few pages, I understood why he gave that warning. Julian Holloway, my husband, the man who sat beside me each night, kissed my forehead and said everything will be fine, was drowning in debt. Not just a few credit cards or failed real estate loans. It was a long list of personal debts, failed investments, and, worst of all, a $120,000 business loan taken out in my name, filed through a shell company he quietly created. I had no idea. No signature of mine was on file, but somehow, he had made it happen. I called Adam immediately. That loan, my voice cracked. Are you sure the signature is forged? There are signs of Photoshop and unauthorized use of personal data, he confirmed. I have someone digging deeper, but that's not the worst part. I froze. What's worse than this? Adam exhaled lightly on the line. He's living a double life, Nancy. At least 2 other women. One in Chicago, one in Miami. I'm just getting started, but both of them think they're the only one. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What are their names? Lisa Hartley, high school teacher, 31. They've been dating for almost 2 years. And Hannah Reeves? Gallery assistant, 27. According to the data I found, he's engaged to Hannah. The wedding is scheduled in 6 weeks. I stood still for a long moment. My mind was spinning with memories. Julian's sudden business trips, the unanswered messages at night, and that ring I once found in a drawer. Thinking it was for me, before he quickly hid it, saying it was for his cousin in Florida. It was all a lie. A perfectly crafted act. I need to meet both of them, I said. My voice no longer shook. It was sharp as a blade. Adam was silent for a moment, then replied, I'll arrange it. That night, I sat by the apartment window, watching the city lights. I thought about Lisa, possibly waiting for a date that would never happen. I thought about Hannah, planning a wedding, completely unaware she was about to marry someone else's husband. And I thought about myself, the woman who had shared a bed with a con artist for 2 years and never knew. Julian had calculated every move, but maybe he misjudged one thing. I don't fall easily. And I never let someone else get hurt the way I was, without doing something about it. I set down my glass of water, eyes cold as steel. The game had only just begun. I met Hannah at a small cafe in Brooklyn where the soft amber lighting and mellow jazz music helped soften the weight of silence. When she walked in, I recognized her instantly. Not because I had seen her photo in the detective's report, but because of her eyes. Bright with trust, happiness, and the nervous excitement of someone about to get married. Hannah didn't recognize me right away, but when I placed my wedding ring on the table, silently, without explanation, she froze. I watched her whole world collapse in a single blink. What is this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm Julian Holloway's wife, I replied slowly. And I'm afraid you're not the first woman he's promised a future to. Tears streamed down her face. Not sobbing, but the kind of tears that come with sudden, chilling clarity. Hannah told me everything. From the day Julian showed up at the gallery with a huge bouquet, to his story about an inheritance on the way that just required them to marry on time. I signed a power of attorney for him to withdraw my savings, she whispered. He said it was temporary, just to prove financial standing to the probate court. I held her hand. He took out a loan of over $100,000 in my name without me knowing. And now, I think we have a chance to do something, not just to get justice, but to end this chain of deception. We spent the next 3 days planning. Claire met with my attorney, handled the legal side. Adam, the private investigator, gathered more evidence. Bank accounts, forged signatures, and documents Julian had sent to Lisa. The third woman in his web of lies. Julian suspected nothing. He was still texting Hannah daily about tablecloth colors, guest lists, and the upcoming Meet the Parents dinner in Manhattan, an event arranged at a luxury restaurant by the Holloway family. That would be the last night Julian thought he was in control. I arrived at the restaurant ahead of time, along with Claire and Hannah. Everything was meticulously prepared. Copies of documents, photos, recordings, and 2 identical wedding rings placed side by side in a black velvet box. When Julian walked in, his arm around Hannah's waist, his face lit up. But when he saw me sitting there in the middle of that elegant room, his smile froze. You, he stammered, eyes darting from me to Hannah and back again. "Nancy, why are you—" "Long time no see, darling husband," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. Charles and Patricia were there too, and the moment they grasped what was happening, the atmosphere shifted. Patricia jumped up. "What is this? This is a family dinner, not a stage show." "No," I said, my eyes locked on Julian. "This is the last dinner you'll perform at without getting caught." Claire stepped forward, opening her bag and pulling out a stack of documents. "If I may present a few findings," she said. "First, Julian Holloway took out a $120,000 loan under the name of Nancy Holloway, his legal wife, without her consent or verified signature. This constitutes forgery and unauthorized use of personal information." Patricia's breath caught. Charles scowled at Julian like he was seeing a stranger. "Second," Claire continued, "while still legally married to Nancy, Julian became engaged to Ms. Hannah Reeves, currently standing here, with the promise of marriage to secure a portion of the Holloway inheritance. This constitutes marital fraud and indicates an attempt to exploit the estate." Hannah said nothing. She simply stepped forward, opened the velvet box, and placed the ring Julian gave her next to mine. The two were identical. The room froze. Julian looked around, no escape in sight. "You don't understand," he turned to me. "Nancy, why are you doing this? We can talk. You didn't have to." "Don't," I cut him off, my eyes like steel. "You were involved with 3 women at the same time. You took money from me, from Hannah, from Lisa, and now you're trying to drag your family's estate into this scam? I won't stay silent anymore." Patricia collapsed back into her seat, trembling. Charles lowered his head, saying nothing. Julian took a step back, his voice cracking. "You can't just destroy everything like this." "No," I said, turning away from the table. "You destroyed everything. I just turned on the lights." As soon as we left the restaurant that night, Hannah and I got into Claire's car, waiting across the street. She didn't say much, just handed me a thick envelope and nodded. "I submitted all the documents to the authorities at 8 p.m., just as planned," she said. "We won't have to wait long." Not even 15 minutes later, as our car turned the corner, I saw red and blue lights reflecting off the restaurant's stone walls. 2 police cruisers parked at the entrance. I didn't look back. I just closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and let my body finally relax for the first time in months. Julian was arrested right at the dinner table. According to Claire the next morning, the police arrived with a warrant for 3 charges: financial fraud, unlawful use of identity for obtaining loans, and marital deception. The evidence was undeniable, from fake bank documents and forged signatures to suspicious transfers to offshore accounts. Through Adam's investigation, a few internal emails from Julian's company revealed that he had been crafting a fake financial profile to legitimize his claim to the family inheritance, contingent on a legal and outwardly stable marriage. But his real marriage, to me, was exactly what brought everything down. 3 days later, Julian's bank accounts were frozen. The court issued an emergency injunction to seize the Holloway family's assets after discovering years of hidden debts, funneled through shell companies and high-risk credit maneuvers. Patricia Holloway appeared in the press the very next morning, trying to deny involvement and placing all the blame on her son. But journalists quickly uncovered documents she had signed. Shady paperwork, including the very trust agreement they tried to get me to sign during that infamous dinner. Charles, the man who had always worn a cold, commanding mask, vanished from public view, offering no statements. All anyone knew was that he sold their multi-million-dollar yacht and temporarily transferred ownership of the Newport estate to a law firm, likely as legal collateral. And me? I returned to my apartment in Denver. Still the same penthouse, still the same glass window looking out to the mountains. But this time, I wasn't alone. Hannah came by after Julian's first hearing. We sat at the small kitchen bar, opened 2 bottles of sparkling water, and baked frozen pizza. A simple meal, but oddly comforting. She laughed as she recalled the moment Julian was cuffed. "He looked at me like I'd stabbed him in the back," Hannah said. But really, he just didn't know I'd finally learned to protect myself. I nodded. I get it. He made us believe it was all about love, about the future. But really, his future was just a new wallet to drain. We clinked our glasses. No fireworks, no grand celebration. Just two women who had been lied to, sitting in warm light, giving themselves a well-earned moment of peace after the storm. A message came in from Claire right after. Julian will remain in custody pending trial. No bail granted. The court has also approved a freeze on his assets until the investigation concludes. I set my phone down, leaned back in my chair, and exhaled. For once, a genuine sigh of relief. I thought of Lisa, the first woman Julian deceived. She had sent a thank you email when she found out we exposed the truth. I never met her in person, but I knew she was reclaiming what was rightfully hers, both financially and emotionally. Things didn't go back to how they were, and I didn't want them to. I had lost 2 years of my life to someone who didn't deserve them. But what I regained, my self-respect, my dignity, and my voice, was worth more than anything. Hannah smiled as she refilled our glasses. Some people say revenge isn't worth it, she said. I looked at her, eyes lit, a calm smile on my lips. I don't think so. From my own story, I realized that sometimes the person who hurts you most is the one you trusted the most. But instead of letting the pain crush me, I chose to face it, expose the truth, and reclaim control of my life. Betrayal is a fall, but if you rise the right way, you'll be stronger than ever. Revenge isn't about rage. It's about showing that I'm not someone who can be controlled, and I will never be silent. What do you think about Nancy's story and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss any emotional family stories and meaningful life lessons. I stood still in front of the reception desk, my heart pounding in my chest as if it wanted to escape. Under the warm golden light of the Wyndham Hotel's grand ballroom in Chicago, neatly arranged name tags with gold-trimmed edges and bold capital letters lay in perfect rows. My fingers trembled slightly as I picked one up. Ashley, the disappointment of the family. I blinked. Once, then again. As if my eyes were trying to erase the words in front of me. But no, they remained, brazen and cold, just like the stares I had endured for over a decade. No one stood nearby. No apologies, no explanations. Just laughter ringing out from the bar inside, where I knew exactly who was laughing the loudest. A laugh I could never forget because, throughout my teenage years, it had always accompanied sharp, veiled remarks. I didn't need to turn around to know it was Evelyn, my father's second wife. The woman who was always impeccably made up, with voluminous blonde hair and a saccharine smile that sent chills down my spine. She had perfected the art of making me feel small, out of place in the very home I once called my own. I tightened my grip on the name tag, feeling the hard plastic press against my palm. A part of me wanted to throw it to the ground, stomp on it, and walk away. But I knew Evelyn was watching me, waiting for me to react, to lash out, to cause a scene, so she could smirk and say, "See? She never grew up." I took a deep breath. Then, with deliberate calm, I set the name tag back on the table as if it meant nothing. But the truth was, I had just set down the last drop of patience I had left for this family. My father's 60th birthday party, Walter Simmons' grand celebration, was being held in the largest ballroom of the hotel, dripping with extravagance. Crystal chandeliers cast dazzling reflections over white cloth tables adorned with elegant candelabras and tall-stemmed red roses in glass vases. Everything exuded opulence, as if the event wasn't meant for loved ones but for the elite to congratulate themselves. I stepped into the ballroom, feeling the cold not from the air conditioning but from the sheer invisibility I carried with me. No one turned to greet me. No one called my name. I was a stranger in a sea of glittering guests, shaking hands, clinking glasses, exchanging pleasantries, without sparing me a single glance. I scanned the room, searching for my father, and then I saw him, standing at the center like a statesman. He beamed as he listened to Julian, Evelyn's son, boast about his new job at a top financial firm in New York. Beside him stood Camilla, Evelyn's youngest daughter, gleefully waving her hand to show off an engagement ring to the surrounding guests. My father lifted his head, his gaze passing over me for less than a second, but that was all it took for me to understand he hadn't been expecting me. He hadn't wanted me here. A quiet chuckle escaped my lips, bitter like unsweetened lemonade. What had I been hoping for? A hug? A simple, "Ashley, I'm glad you came, how foolish of me." I veered left toward the drinks table. Grasping a glass of mocktail, I steadied my hands, refusing to let them shake. I didn't want them to see me as weak. I didn't want them to know they had won again. "Oh, Ashley, is that you?" Evelyn's voice cooed beside me, smooth as velvet yet lined with thorns. I turned. She wore an emerald green evening gown, a classic pearl necklace, and bold red lipstick. Her smile was flawless, so perfect, it was eerie. "It's been a while," I replied, my voice light but firm. She tilted her head, her gaze sweeping over me. "What a surprise that you made it. With the freelance work you do, I suppose your schedule is quite flexible." I knew what she meant. No fancy title, no fixed salary, nothing that met the Simmons family's standards. I hadn't even responded when Evelyn lightly patted my shoulder and leaned in, her voice a mere whisper. "By the way, that name tag was adorable. Someone prepared it just for you." I followed her gaze and immediately understood what she was referring to. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even shocked. I felt only one thing: finality. Because today I would no longer stay silent as I had in years past. I used to believe I was my father's whole world. When I was little, he would take me to the park every Saturday afternoon, buy me strawberry ice cream and sit on a bench listening to me chatter endlessly. I could still remember the warmth of his hand gripping mine as we crossed the street, the sound of his laughter when I fell off my bike for the first time but shouted, "I'm fine anyway." To me, those moments defined love. But it all ended the summer I turned 11, when he brought home a woman named Evelyn and 2 children he called his new family. Evelyn was 39, divorced, a literature teacher who dressed as if she were about to give an award speech. Her son Julian was my age, and her daughter Camila, 3 years younger, was often compared to a living porcelain doll. I vividly remember the first dinner they had in our house that had only ever been just the 2 of us. Evelyn sat in my mother's old chair, using the hand-embroidered napkins my mother had left behind. I didn't say a word. I just watched, feeling something quiet within me shift, like a door silently closing. At first, I tried to fit in. I forced a smile when Evelyn called me Little Ashley, even though her voice sent shivers down my spine. I played with Camila, despite her constant whining, and I attempted to find common ground with Julian, though he only spoke to me when he needed help with homework. But within months, I realized everything had changed, and not for the better. My father started forgetting our one-on-one traditions. Instead, he was always busy with their family outings, Camila's theater performances, Julian's sports tournaments. And me? I was at home, cleaning, babysitting, studying, and learning how to nod politely when Evelyn said, "You're the big sister. You should set an example." I became an unpaid housemaid in my own home. "Ashley, Camila spilled her milk. Clean it up. Ashley, tuck Camila into bed for me." Ashley, don't forget to take out the trash after doing the dishes. Even when it wasn't my fault, I was always the one responsible, and whenever I protested, Evelyn would smile sweetly and say, "Don't make a big deal out of small things." And my father? He would just shake his head, signaling me to stay quiet. I still remember a chilly March afternoon when I was 14. I waited outside school for almost an hour, my hands numb from the lingering Minnesota winter. When I finally got home, mud on my shoes, I found my father in the living room, laughing with Evelyn, Julian, and Camilla, unwrapping early birthday presents for Camilla. No one had remembered me. No one asked why I was late. But the final blow came when I was 17, preparing my college applications. Before she passed, my mother, a meticulous, loving woman, had set up a savings account just for me. She had scraped together every penny for nearly a decade as an accountant, her only wish being for me to have an education and a future of my own. One autumn morning, I checked the account, expecting to find enough for my first 2 years at Northwestern University, my dream school. Instead, the balance showed just 3 numbers, $128. I thought it was a mistake. I called the bank. And then my heart stopped when the teller confirmed that my father had withdrawn every cent 3 months ago for his son's tuition. His son wasn't me, it was Julian. I went home, the bank statement still clenched in my hands. I handed it to my father and asked, "Why?" He spoke as if he were discussing groceries. "Julian got into Michigan State. He needed the money immediately. You're smart. You can get scholarships." I wanted to scream that it was my mother's money, that it was her last gift to me, but I only managed to whisper, "Do you think Mom would have agreed?" He looked at me, said nothing. Then he turned away. That night, I packed my things. Just a few sets of clothes, my journal, and an old photo of my mother and me on my 8th birthday. I left that house in silence. No one saw me off. No one asked why. And no one tried to stop me. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I made a vow to myself. I would never return. At least not as the disappointment they had labeled me. Because in that moment, I knew I had only one choice left: to become the person my mother had always believed I could be. I left home on a crisp October morning, the air just beginning to bite with the arrival of fall. Each breath I exhaled turned into a misty white cloud before me, but inside I burned. Not with anger, but with the certainty that there was no turning back. The only luggage I carried was an old suitcase my mother had used in her college days, along with a few books, a sweater, and what little savings I had from my part-time job at the local bakery. No one saw me off, no hugs, no words of encouragement. As the door closed behind me, I heard laughter from inside, Evelyn and Camilla rewatching Julian's birthday video. Meanwhile, I walked away in silence, as if I had never belonged there. I started my new life in Grand Rapids, nearly a 4-hour drive from home. It wasn't a big city, but it was big enough for me to disappear from my father's sight, and from his perfect family. I rented a small basement room from an elderly couple, Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins, who let me pay rent in weekly installments. During the day, I worked as a receptionist at a dental clinic. At night, I washed dishes at a small Italian restaurant down the street. After 10 p.m., I took online courses, transfer credits to apply to the local public university. I didn't have time to feel sad. I didn't have the energy to dwell on the past. Each day was a cycle of tasks to complete, bills to pay, and long nights spent typing essays under dim yellow light. Meanwhile, Julian, the chosen son, posted pictures of pool parties in his dorm, vacations in Mexico, and brand new sneakers sponsored by Dad. Camila started a vlog titled Life Updates, documenting her new life in a penthouse apartment in Los Angeles. An apartment Vivelin had rented for her while she searched for inspiration to pursue art. I didn't follow them, but whenever their posts appeared on my feed by chance, I simply smirked. Not out of jealousy, but because I knew if I waited for justice, I'd grow old and die in disappointment. So instead of waiting, I chose to act. 2 years later, I was accepted into Western Michigan University with a partial scholarship, thanks to my GPA and an essay titled, "Where Do You Find Strength When There's Nothing Left to Lose?" I wrote that essay in one night, tears soaking my keyboard. But I had never felt stronger. I kept working. By my second year, I started freelancing as a web designer for small businesses. At first, I built basic websites, but over time, I built a solid client network, especially after a regional coffee shop chain adopted my design for all their stores. I didn't stop working. By my final year, I was not only able to cover my tuition, but I had also saved enough to rent my own small apartment. No longer in a basement, no longer falling asleep beside rattling water pipes. I even launched my own website, where clients could book services and browse my portfolio. On the day of my graduation, I stood among hundreds of students, sunlight warming my black gown and cap. Around me, people cheered, hugged, threw flowers, and posed for endless photos. Meanwhile, I stood quietly, smiling, and wrapped my arms around myself. No one from my family came. No one asked what I had majored in. No one congratulated me. But I didn't need them. I had myself, the only person who would never abandon me. After the ceremony, I walked home alone, bought myself a small cake and a smoothie. I lit a candle, took a picture, and wrote in my journal, "I did it." Without anyone. For the longest time, I thought they had forgotten me. After all, I had cut off contact. But I was wrong. Every year, on special occasions like Thanksgiving or Christmas, I still received formal party invitations from Evelyn, printed on fine stationery, with sweetly worded messages like, "We hope you'll come home and reunite with your family." I never replied. But I kept the letters, not to read, but to remind myself. They only remembered me when they needed me to complete their perfect family picture. I kept building my career. At 24, I started a small digital design firm called Lighthouse Studio, named after what my mother used to call me, my little light. I hired 2 employees and expanded my clientele to neighboring areas. And Julian? One day I came across an article he'd been fired from his first job after just 6 months. Camilla? She shut down her vlog after a flood of negative comments, accusing her of wasting money without producing real art. As for me, every morning I brewed coffee, opened my laptop, reviewed new contracts, and reminded myself, I don't live to prove anything to them. I live to keep my promise to myself. To never go back to where I started. I once believed that if I became successful enough, if I proved myself, they would look at me differently. But I was wrong, so many times. Even though I had been gone for nearly 6 years, I occasionally showed up at major family gatherings, mainly due to pressure from my mother's side of the family. They still believed in family above all, not knowing or refusing to acknowledge that this so-called family had left me alone in the freezing cold without a second thought. But I didn't blame them. They only knew what Evelyn told them, that I was the rebellious child who isolated herself to pursue some vague digital art dream. On Christmas Eve of my 25th year, I received a call from Aunt Carol, my late mother's younger sister. "Ashley, at least come to Christmas dinner. For me," she said, "it would make me happy if you came." I had 1,000 reasons to say no. But I owed her too much. From the times she secretly slipped me lunch money in high school, to her short but heartfelt holiday texts. I couldn't refuse. So I went. It was a bitterly cold night, snow covering the path leading to my father's mansion. The house was lit up like always, strings of colored lights glowing, a massive Christmas tree nearly reaching the ceiling, decked out in golden baubles and red ribbons. I stepped inside, and almost instantly the cold outside was replaced by another kind of chill, the one in Evelyn's gaze. "Oh, Ashley, you made it," she said, her voice laced with mock surprise. "It's good to see you finally remembered your way home." I didn't respond, just nodded at a few familiar relatives. Aunt Carol rushed over and hugged me, her warm smile the only thing keeping me from regretting my decision. The dining room was meticulously arranged, a long table draped in red velvet, candlelight flickering against crystal glasses, and a perfectly curated spread of traditional holiday dishes. Julian sat at the head of the table, boasting about his recent company-sponsored business trip to San Francisco. Camilla flaunted her new art collection, currently exhibited at a modern gallery in Santa Monica, a connection Evelyn helped arrange. My father sat in the center, looking like the ruler of a small kingdom. When I stepped into the dining room, he glanced up for a brief moment, then turned away, as if I were nothing more than a passing breeze. Dinner passed in the suffocating atmosphere I had long grown accustomed to. I ate in silence, ignoring the pretentious conversations. But I knew it was only a matter of time before they turned their attention to me. And right on cue, after dessert was served, my father set down his glass and turned to me, his deep voice cutting through the chatter. "You're still doing that little design thing, right?" I looked up, meeting his scrutinizing gaze. Every eye at the table was on me, waiting for my response. Or rather, waiting to see me fumble. "Yes," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I still run my digital design firm. This year, I signed a contract with a nationwide hotel chain." For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then Evelyn let out a soft chuckle, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. "Sounds impressive. Strange, though. I don't recall seeing your name in the papers." Julian laughed loudly, adding, "Or is it still just designing websites for that little bakery down the street?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My father crossed his arms, took a slow sip of his drink, and said, "You're smart. I won't deny that. But if you had listened sooner, joined me at the company, you'd have a real position by now. The way you do business, it's too unstable." I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in years. And what I saw in his eyes wasn't concern or worry, no matter how much he tried to make it seem that way. It was fear. Fear that I could succeed without him. Fear that I would prove him wrong. I smiled, soft but unwavering. I don't need a position handed to me. I build my own." The table fell silent. Not because I had spoken loudly, but because no one had expected me to respond like that. This wasn't the same Ashley who used to know her place. This wasn't the child who sat quietly in the corner, trying not to draw attention. I wasn't seeking approval anymore. I was simply telling the truth. That night, as everyone cleaned up and the children gathered around the tree to open presents, I left that house in silence, just as I had when I was 18. But this time, it wasn't because I was being pushed out. It was because I had chosen not to belong there anymore. And the most surprising part? When I stepped outside, I didn't feel as cold as I had when I arrived. Maybe because I knew that the next time someone asked, "Why don't you come home?" I would smile and answer, "I have a home of my own." I was still standing there, right by the reception desk at my father's 60th birthday party, staring at the name tag. Ashley. The disappointment of the family? The chandelier above cast shimmering light onto the marble floor, but all I felt was a deep, lingering chill. Laughter rang through the air, glasses clinked, and soft jazz melodies floated from the live band in the corner. Everything was staged perfectly, a flawless tableau of a model family. A meticulously crafted picture, except for me. The ink stain that had been crossed out, yet still bled through. I could leave. I had left before. But this time I didn't want to retreat in silence. I was no longer the Ashley who endured quietly, who bit her tongue and pretended not to hear the jabs. Not tonight. I stepped into the grand hall where my father, Walter Simmons, stood at the center of his circle of guests. Dressed in a gray suit, silk tie, holding his wine glass as if he were delivering a presidential speech. Evelyn stood close by, her hand lightly touching his arm whenever he said something that made the guests laugh. I walked straight to the bar and took a glass of water. I didn't need alcohol to make me strong. As I turned back, my eyes met Camilla's. She stood with a group of people, probably social media influencers. Her expression wavered between curiosity and disdain. Then Julian noticed me too, exchanging a pointed glance with his mother. I lifted my glass and tapped it lightly. A soft ting rang out, not loud, but enough to turn a few heads. I stepped forward, right into the center of the room where all the lights converged. I took a deep breath. "Sorry to interrupt the celebration," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, just enough to make the surrounding chatter die down. My father's eyes widened for a brief second before he raised an eyebrow, about to say something, but I continued before he could. "Tonight is my father's 60th birthday. A milestone. A life of success, power, and remarkable talent in deciding who is worthy to be called his child." The air thickened. A few whispers spread through the crowd. Evelyn straightened her posture, pressing her lips together. "Some of you may not know," I went on. "I'm Ashley, the only daughter of Walter Simmons. But judging by how he treats me, you'd think I was just another stranger at this party." I lifted my chin, locking eyes with him. "Your daughter, the one erased from family photos. The one you never showed up for at a single graduation. The one you scoffed at whenever my career was mentioned because it didn't align with what you wanted." No one spoke. I could hear my own heartbeat, but my voice remained steady. "Tonight, someone left me a gift. A name tag labeled, 'The Disappointment of the Family.' How thoughtful, how creative. But if you thought that would make me bow my head, then you forgot one thing. I have learned to stand tall, without any of you holding me up." I turned to Evelyn, my voice lower, colder. "Evelyn, you've spent over a decade trying to erase me. From dinner tables, from photo frames, from college funds, from my father's trust. But you forgot one thing. I'm still here. I exist. And I am not afraid of you anymore." Evelyn's eyes flashed, but she said nothing. I shifted my gaze to Julian and Camila. "Julian, Camila, you had everything. Favoritism, money, opportunities I could only dream of. But I wonder, without my father's backing, how far would either of you really go?" I placed my glass on the table beside me. Gently, firmly. "Dad," I said, calling him that for the first time in years. For so long, I only wanted one thing: to be seen as myself, not as a replica of someone else, not as a mold you created. But I understand now. That will never happen." I smiled, a light, razor-sharp smile. "And I also understand I don't need that to keep moving forward." I took a step back, turning away, my gaze sweeping over the entire room. The stunned faces, the uneasy whispers, the discomfort in their eyes. "I hope you all enjoy the rest of the party," I said, louder this time. "Because this will be the last time you see me." No one stopped me. No one dared. I left the room, the door closing softly behind me. Cold, but not as cold as the years I had spent being forgotten. I stepped outside, tilting my head up. The Chicago night wind howled, but I had never felt more at ease. Freedom had never been clearer. The doors to the banquet hall shut behind me in a strange silence, as if the world inside had been severed entirely. I walked down the long hallway, my heels clicking against the marble floor. Cold, final, no more music, no more dazzling chandeliers, no more scrutinizing gazes clinging to me like they had for years. There was only me, and the sweet quiet of freedom. I got into my car, sitting in the driver's seat without starting the engine. The streetlights cast a faint glow onto the windshield, reflecting my face in the rearview mirror. Not the girl who once longed for her father to turn back. Not the girl who wished Evelyn would change. Not the girl who hoped Julian or Camila would treat her like family. I looked into my own eyes and saw something I had never seen so clearly before. My phone vibrated. A message popped up from Evelyn. "Ashley, you embarrassed the entire family. That behavior was absolutely unacceptable." I didn't bother reading the rest. The next message came from Julian. "So childish, always playing the victim." Then Camila. "If your life is hard, that's your choice. Don't blame anyone else." I scrolled through them silently. No anger, no tears, just a quiet nod to myself. I did the right thing. Then the last message made me pause. The sender, Dad, call me, we need to talk. I set my phone down on the seat beside me and started the car. The engine purred softly in the quiet night. I drove away from the hotel, following the riverbank where city lights shimmered over the rippling water. No destination in mind, just the need to get away, to let my mind breathe for once. By the time I arrived at my small apartment, the clock was nearing midnight. I locked the door, hung up my coat, and turned on the warm yellow light in the living room. The space was modest but tidy, carefully curated. Every piece of furniture, every bookshelf, every chair, every framed picture was something I had chosen for myself. A reflection of the life I had built with my own hands. My phone continued buzzing. Messages, missed calls, social media notifications, all from them. No apologies, no concern for how I was feeling. Just blame, outrage, and demands for me to come back and take responsibility for their humiliation. I opened my contacts, scrolling through the names one by one. Evelyn, blocked. Julian, blocked. Camilla, blocked. And finally, my father, blocked. Silence. Like shutting a door that should have been closed long ago. The next morning, I woke to birds chirping outside my window. No notifications, no messages dragging me back into an old reality. I brewed coffee, played soft jazz, and opened my laptop to start work as usual. But I knew everything was different now. Mid-morning, an unfamiliar number appeared on my screen. I hesitated for a few seconds, then answered. A familiar voice spoke, calm but with a clear effort to restrain itself. Ashley, it's your father. I exhaled slowly, closing my eyes for a moment. I know. Not even one call? Not even a word? I said nothing. Then, slowly, I replied, "What do you want to say?" A heavy sigh came through the phone. "You went too far last night. No matter how upset you were, you shouldn't have made a scene in front of everyone. People are talking. My reputation—" "Your reputation?" I cut him off. My voice wasn't raised, but it was firm. "You never cared about my dignity all these years. But now you're worried about yours? When did you become so bitter, Ashley? Maybe the day you forgot I existed as part of this family." Silence. I continued, letting the words spill out like stones finally lifted from my chest. "You're only calling because you want control. Because you're afraid people will find out your daughter doesn't fit into the perfect family you've created. But you know what? I spent years in silence, in pitiful glances, in the constant feeling of being pushed aside, and now I choose a different kind of silence, the kind where none of you have a place in my life anymore." I ended the call. She didn't wait for him to respond. 1 second later, I blocked his number. No goodbyes, no regrets, no looking back. I stood up, threw open the window, and let the crisp morning air rush in. The scent of coffee still lingered in the air, and my chest felt lighter than it had in years. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that from that moment on, I was finally living, not as a shadow in someone else's story, but as the main character in my own. A week after that fateful birthday party, I sat in my favorite cafe near the office, hands wrapped around a warm latte. The past few days had passed in a quiet, liberating calm. No more flashing notifications. No more Evelyn's voice echoing in my mind whenever I tried to rest. No more guilt-driven thoughts telling me to call home just to prove I wasn't ungrateful. For the first time in years, I felt light. Not the kind of lightness that comes from running away, but the kind that comes from finally loosening an invisible rope that had been strangling me for half my life. I felt no guilt, not even a little. If anything, I felt like I had finally stopped pretending. I used to believe I needed their approval. I thought if I tried a little harder, if I was a little kinder, if I was a little better, maybe my father would look at me the way he looked at Julian. Maybe Evelyn would stop mocking me. Maybe Camila would stop treating me like I was beneath her. But after years of being pushed aside, I understood the truth. Validation from people who never intended to give it was nothing more than an illusion. No matter how hard I tried, I would never be enough for them. One Sunday morning, sunlight streamed through my white curtains as I stood in my living room, small but warm, and asked myself, if today were the first day I could truly live for myself, what would I do? I put on a classical playlist, opened my planner, and wrote the first words in blue ink. Live for myself, not for anyone else's expectations. I started making time for things I had once put aside, the paintings I never finished, the books I left halfway through, the cafes I always wanted to visit but skipped because I was too busy proving my worth. I re-uploaded a few personal design projects on my company's website, not client work, just things I created simply because they made me feel alive. And to my surprise, a week later, a boutique furniture brand from Portland reached out, asking if I would collaborate on their fall campaign. We want something with soul, and we see that in your designs. I read that sentence over and over. No talk of fitting industry standards, no demands to match market trends. Just an honest recognition of my work from people who had no idea who my father was, who valued me for what I created, not for where I came from. That feeling of being seen for my own talent, not for my place in a family, was what I had been searching for all along. One afternoon, I sat in the park with Aunt Carol, her hand gently holding mine. You know, Ashley, she said softly, since your mother passed, I always worried you'd be swallowed up by the coldness of that household. But today, looking at you, I'm so proud. I squeezed her hand. I didn't need anyone else. I just needed one person who truly saw me, and that was enough. Freedom, I realized, wasn't just about leaving a house, a party, or a phone call. True freedom was letting go of the need to be accepted in order to exist. I no longer needed my father's approval to believe in my own worth. I didn't need Evelyn's fake smiles to feel loved. I didn't need Julian or Camila to stop flaunting their privilege for me to know I wasn't lesser. All I needed was me, the person who had survived it all, who stood strong, and who had never let her heart grow cold. There were days when I still thought about the past, but not with bitterness, just as a part of the journey. Every wound had taught me something. Every act of neglect had taught me to remember myself. And every time I was pushed away, I had been brought closer to the truth. Not everyone who carries the title of family truly brings you love. It was a lesson I paid for with my youth. But I knew there was nothing more valuable than the freedom to walk forward, unburdened, never again needing permission to be myself. Because now I was no longer the disappointment of the family. I was my own greatest pride. From my own story, I've realized no one has the right to define your worth except for you. Family isn't always a safe place if it forces you to forget who you are. True freedom isn't found in acceptance. It's found in having the courage to walk away from relationships that hurt you. I no longer live to please others. Now I live to honor myself, the person who endured it all and never looked back. What do you think about Ashley's journey? Have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose between family expectations and your own happiness? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family, resilience, and self-discovery.